Welcome to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement, a podcast where we dive into the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being of the law enforcement officer.
Minor injury accident to the 2700 block of 156th Avenue Northeast.
All right, welcome back to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement. I'm your host, Vernon Phillips, and today on this show, we've got a special guest. We've got Lieutenant Eric McCants with us, and I'm just going to turn it over to him, let him jump right off and give us a little idea who he is, kind of his background, his hobbies, and kind of things like that. So, Lieutenant, why don't you go ahead and jump in, sir?
Hey, how you doing? Well, like you said, my name is Lieutenant Eric McCants. Currently, I work for the Burke County Sheriff Department. I've been in the law enforcement realm for about 12 years. Started off at actually, it's the city that's inside the county I work for now, which is Waynesboro Police Department. But even before that, like I said, I started off in grade school. I went to a private school for like the first 4 years of my education, and then I went to a public school. And it was kind of like a change of pace going from a public school after going in private school and having that type of structure. So it took me a little while. Got into some trouble like throughout my years. Went to alternative school my 8th grade year, all that stuff. A lot of fighting, different things like that. But eventually, my uncle and my cousin moved down from Alabama, and they did martial arts. So I started doing martial arts with them. About my 9th or 10th grade year in high school, I started wrestling. And like I said, I've always been in music because my mother has always encouraged my brother and sister to be in music. So I started off on the violin. I played the trumpet. And like I said, I did all that from like middle school to high school. So I've always had that part of me. But like I said, I started doing martial arts with my cousin. And the original plan was when I graduated high school was to go to school and to major in business management because they wanted me to handle the business part, like to pay the bills, make sure everything was up to par. So I graduated when I was 17, went off to college. It was a little too much for me. First of all, I made the mistake of making all my classes at 8 a.m. because in my head, I figured that, hey, let me go ahead and get these classes out the way. I have the rest of the day to myself. I can do what I need to do.
Yeah.
Well, lo and behold, I couldn't get up a class. And if I did go to class, I end up being sleepy, or either I'll go somewhere and go eat, couple different things. So eventually I had to academically withdraw. I started working at a local grocery store called Kroger. And when I was in Kroger, my mother was, harassing me as mothers do, telling me that, hey, you need to go back, get into school. You need to find something that you're going to do for the rest of your life. So just so happened he used to be a special duty officer. He was working security there. And he was telling another guy about the police academy. He was saying that you're always going to have a job. There's always going to be dependable work. And like I said, it's always going to be criminal. So you're going to have that job security. So eventually I started talking to him because, like I said, my mother was literally texting me at the same time, like, hey, you need to find something to do. Just working at the grocery store is not going to be it. So I talked to the guy here, like, man, you should try the police academy. It's lots of fun. And like I said, I didn't know anything about law enforcement to that extent. Like I said, my uncle was in law enforcement, but that was before I was alive. One of my best friend's fathers was in law enforcement. But like I said, I just seen police officers. I never really interacted with them. So I went through the police academy in 2011. Went through that, passed everything, and started working in the Waynesboro Police Department, and then I fell in love with the job. As a young police officer, I started when I was 20, had a lot of problems. I didn't know how to separate that I was a law enforcement officer and that when I was off duty, I'm still going to be held as a law enforcement officer. Like I say, no matter if I'm off duty, whatever I do, they're still going to be like, well, hey, you're a police officer, you should know better. So it took me a little while to understand that because I used to do things that young officers do, speed, lose equipment, just be kind of careless as a young officer. So eventually, my current sheriff, who is my chief now, he was like, hey, man, I know you're going to be a good officer and all that stuff, but he said, I'm going to have to make you resign. So he typed my resignation letter in front of me. I didn't know he was typing it. He was just talking to me, making me feel good. I'm like, hey, man, you're a good officer. You got your head on straight. He said, you're going to do great things. But he typed my resignation letter in front of me and told me to sign it. So long story short, about 2 or 3 months later, one of my investigators that worked with us got the chief job at Payne College. They just started a police department at that college. And so he brought me on as a nighttime sergeant. I did that for about 2 years. As far as me as law enforcement, I'd say working in the school system, it wasn't my cup of tea. Like I say, you got to be a little bit delicate with kids, even in college. But like I say, at the end of the day, like I said, they don't want these kids to get those type of records. Like I say, you're going to have the problems with kids smoking weed, fighting and all that stuff. It's me as a police officer, I'm like, hey, you do the crime, you go to jail. Well, they try to handle a lot of things internally, try to make sure that they don't mess up these kids' life, mess up their life, just because one incident. So that took a little challenge for me to understand how to work that. And then my current sheriff got the chief job at our Board of Education, which is K through 12. Like I said, that's a whole different type of ball game, working with little kids. And like I said, The smaller kids is fine, elementary. High school kids, you can deal with them because they're a little bit older. But the middle school kids, that takes a lot. That 6th through 8th grade, I say it takes a special person to do it, and I'm just not that type of person. Like I said, I know how I am. I'm real straightforward with people. If I tell you to do something, I expect you to do it, especially when I'm making a law enforcement matter. But at the end of the day, like I said, at one point they're still kids, but at another point they want to be grown. And like I said, that just doesn't collide
Oh
with
yeah.
yeah, that doesn't collide with me. So anyway, I did that for a year and a half. My sheriff got elected. Well, he got elected as sheriff down here in Burke County, Georgia, and I follow him down there. Start off on road patrol like everybody else. Uh, we have a bigger agency called Richard County. A lot of people came down from Richard County to work with my sheriff, and they was all on this team called crime suppression. Basically, it was a proactive patrol unit, and basically they were the, like I say, Green Berets or the Navy SEALs of our agency, and everybody wanted to be a part of it. So what I did is I became a student of them. I said they need somebody to do some paperwork, proper receipts, whatever. I just followed them around, did what they need to do, and like I say, I learned how they work. So eventually, when the spot came open, they allowed me to come on the team. And like I said, I was on crime suppression for about 2 years. And I'm gonna say I did my best work there. Like I said, I'm a proactive police officer. I like finding drugs, guns, people that's wanted, things like that. Uh, Eventually, my sheriff came up to me and he like, "Hey man, I know you love crime suppression, but," he said, "maybe you should try something else. Maybe you should try being a supervisor." Me and my eyes, I'm like, I'm having fun. I'm making good cases. I'm like, I don't want to supervise no people. I don't want that type of responsibility. He like, well, hey, just give it an idea. We have a couple of sergeant spots coming open. So eventually I got the nighttime sergeant position. Uh, I enjoyed that. We had a tight knit group. And one thing I was always taught was just to make sure that the people you work with feel like family. So, like on Sundays, we'll try to have dinner together. We always try to keep that close knit together. And did that for a while. My sheriff came up to me again. He like, well, I still know you plan on going state or federal one of these days. Maybe you should try to get some investigation experience too. Well, once again, I was having fun on night shift. I'm enjoying the shift I'm in. Like I said, we got that pond together. I really don't want to leave. But you're like, well, just give it an idea. So a narcotics sergeant spot came open. Put my application in for that. I eventually got the job. And like I said, I started working in narcotics. I did narcotics for about 2 years. And while I was in narcotics, I was able to be a part of the U.S. Marshals Task Force. So I did all that while I was in narcotics. And like I said, I enjoyed it. And like I tell people, I say working the dope game is kind of crazy because I think you start out with maybe a gram or two of meth, and you end up with kilos. Just how crazy it is. I say you'll be taking cars, money, just from a little simple gram of meth. So that's why I tell people that work narcotics, it takes special people. Like I say, you're gonna be out there all day, following people, looking at houses all day, trying to find patterns. But I did that, and then we had a special operations division lieutenant come up, which I'm currently in now. Basically running the crime suppression team and the canine officers. He's like, well, you've done your supervision, you've done your investigation part. I said, you've been in law enforcement for a good little minute. I said, you have your degrees. He said, what do you think about mentoring other people to do what you do? I'm like, I still like working. He's like, well, it won't be a 24-hour, desk job. He said, you can get out there and still work, but I still want you to mentor the younger people so they can have that appreciation for practical patrol like you do. So got onto that, and that's what I'm doing now along with SWAT.
All right, so there's a whole lot of stuff there that we could try to unpack, but it sounds like you've got a lot of experience coming behind you, and you had a lot of good mentorship just yourself. With your current sheriff kind of pushing you and getting you to stretch and grow a little bit. So there's a couple of things there I want to unpack, but first off, so when you that first initial time you went in there and you sat down, they actually typed up your resignation letter. How did that sit with you?
Oh, well, like I said, at first I didn't know what was going on because he had brought me in. Like I said, I was getting in trouble for a lot of different things. Like I said, I was 20. Like I said, I didn't know that what I was doing off duty affected me. And like I say, as 20-year-old, as a male, females come along being in law enforcement. It's just a lot of stuff going on. But anyway, he brought me in the office. He was talking to me like, hey, man, you're going to be a good officer one day. You're doing a good job. And I said, he was typing, but I wasn't paying attention when he was typing because he was on the other side of the computer. And
Mm-hmm.
like, man, I look forward to you doing big things, and I wish the best for you. And then wish the best. I'm like, what's he talking about? Wish the best. So anyway, he like, hey, man, go grab that piece of paper off the printer. All right. And he said, look at that, read that over. He said, I need you to sign that. He said, that's your resignation letter. I was like, oh. So anyway, I signed it, but inside of me, I was like, I'm about to flip this man desk. But I kept it together. Like, hey, man, I need your gun, your badge, and all that stuff. So, at the first couple of weeks, like I said, it was hard. Like, even the first year or so, like, I really even talked to him. Like I said, I was pissed off at him. But eventually, I grew up and I understood that it was me that caused all those problems, all those situations that happened and arise, and that I needed to mature. And like I said, he was just looking out for my best interest. Because basically, what he was telling me is if I kept down that same road, I'm gonna end up getting in more trouble than what I can get out of.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people in the law enforcement community, especially the younger guys coming in, that don't understand that just because you're off, right, doesn't necessarily mean you're off, right?
Mm-hmm.
That a lot of them work in the same community that they live.
Yeah.
So it's not like people don't know you don't work, for a police department or a sheriff's office or some other type of entity. It's not like they don't know that. They know who you are. They know who you work for. So even when you're off, they still expect you to act some type of way, right? They still expect you to be professional in some capacity. And I think that there's a lot with some of the younger generations coming in that maybe really can't separate that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it sounds like it was a good journey for you. It was a good lesson for you. And looking back on that, how much of an impact did that have on where you're at today, like pushing you forward?
It had a big impact because, like I said, now I think twice before doing anything. Like I say, because you just got to make sure that one, you got to know what's going around your surroundings, and like I say, you want to act out of character. But like I tell people, and that's why I tell people about social media, and other things. I say that little 5 minutes or 5 seconds of anger, if you type the wrong thing, that's going to be held against you your whole career. Like I say, people will go back 20, 30 years and see things that you said on your Facebook, on your MySpace, and all that stuff, and bring it up, and that can make you lose your job. So you got to make sure you remember what you're saying, what you're putting out there. So that's why I tell people, no matter what's going on, don't let it get the best of you. Like I say, if you're going to vent, go home, go in the closet, and vent to yourself. Like I say, if you do it on social media sites or if you do it on camera or someone catches you on camera, that can be held against you. So that was just one big lesson that I took from that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and the other thing is, I think that with a lot of the new generation coming in, they seem to not be able to kind of be able to be sat down and take that criticism, and not so much criticism, but the constructive correction,
Mm-hmm.
right? Sit down and like, hey, look, you've got a lot of potential, you've got a lot of things going for you, but there's some things you need to address. There's some things you need to dial back, some things you need to dial in. You got to do a little fine tuning. And it seems like a lot of the newer generation, they don't really know how to handle that. They don't know how to really kind of process that and then walk that back and allow that to resonate with them.
Yeah, that's very true. Like I say, man, I see it nowadays. Like I say, you'll talk to an officer. As I say, you're generally trying to help them out, trying to give them pointers, all that stuff. But what happens is they'll get mad, and like I say, I see it all the time. They'll just try to leave the agency. They're like, okay, well, they don't like me. They're not gonna let me do what I need to do.
I'll go somewhere else. You don't want me here, I'm gonna go somewhere else.
That's their biggest
right?
thing. And like I try to tell them, I say, people are looking out for your best interest. Most time when these older officers are telling you something, they've been through that. They know what's about to come, and they see the derailment about to happen. But they're trying to prevent you from getting to that, but you can't see that. And like I say, as a young person, you're hard headed. You don't want to listen to anybody. But for me, I had to, take a step back, look at myself and be like, okay, well, you was doing stupid stuff. Like I said, he was just trying to help you not to do any more stupid stuff so you get in more trouble. But it's kind of hard to make them see that. Because like I say, one of the biggest things I learned as being a supervisor is that no matter what you tell somebody, even if you're trying to help them, they're going to be like, well, why? Why can't I do this when I'm off duty? Why can't I do that? This and that. I'm like, hey, you could do it, but I say you might get in trouble for it. And they just can't understand that. They can't process that. And they like say they end up doing something stupid and now they're in trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a good lesson there. And I think that if people would listen to, individuals like yourself that have kind of walked that road and been through that, like, hey, look, I've sat where you're sitting now, and I understand, where you're at. I understand where you're coming from, but let me tell you kind of how it went for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a lot of people that could benefit from that. So as we kind of move on, we know that law enforcement is extremely demanding, right? We know that it takes a toll on the individual. So how do you guard yourself? What do you do to keep yourself healthy, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? What are some of the things you do to just keep yourself at a good balance?
Well, one thing I do is like most mornings I get up at 4 a.m. and go to the gym. Like gym is basically my peaceful place. Like I love going to the gym. I love, lifting weights and just making out a good workout section. Just recently, just started around this year, because I don't know if you can tell, I'm a bigger boy. I've never been really into running long distance, but I've been starting to run 5Ks and 10Ks. And while I'm not, doing the 5K in 18 minutes like everybody else is doing it, I'm going out there and doing it. And like I said, and like I tell people like with running, like I said, I've never experienced that runner high, but I just get the enjoyment of going out there saying that I completed it. So what I'm doing is like every month is I'm trying to complete at least a 5K, just to have something say I've done it as far as the cardio part and just keep my cardiovascular up. Like I say, as law enforcement, you're going to run after people. I say it's not like people are getting slower; they're getting younger and faster. So you got to make sure you keep yourself in shape. Additionally, like I say, just try to spend time with the family. Uh, Making sure that you spend time with them. But like I say, the job is demanding. You're going to be away a lot, but you got to make sure and let them know that they're important in your life. So make sure you keep them first and all that stuff, and then just having time to yourself. Some people don't like being alone, but you got to learn how to be alone with your thoughts. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, but you got to learn how to balance it. And for me, when I'm alone, I like to listen to like different podcasts or different motivational people such as Les Brown, David Goggins, Jocko. It just helps me keep balance. So those are a couple of things that I do to keep myself centered from spiraling out of control.
Well, that's good. I mean, so I kind of think on the whole running thing. I used to do a lot of running, several years ago, and I keep telling myself I'm going to get back into it,
Mm-hmm.
but I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But you know how that is, because I don't mind the running, but what I don't like is getting yourself back to the point where you can run and you can do it for a sustained amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
right, and actually get done and feel good about it. But it's kind of getting back into it where it's that grueling every day where you're just like, oh, this is terrible.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I understand. I'm not going to go out there and do no 18-minute 5K. I got a buddy that goes and he'll go run 10, 15, 20 miles and just like it's nothing.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, if I go try to run 10 miles, you're gonna come find me, and you're gonna probably have to bring an ambulance.
Oh yeah,
because it's just not gonna work out.
Yes, sir. I understand.
So, but no, it's good. It's good to maintain balance in your life. It's good to be proactive and be out there doing things. And it's like you don't have to go run. Like if you just go out and you walk, get out, go for a bike ride, do something, get out and get moving, and just stay, just pushing forward.
Yes, sir.
It doesn't mean because a lot of times we start talking about physical fitness, right? And people automatically think, well, I got to go to the gym, I got to go buy all this fancy powders and pre-workouts and all this stuff, and I got to start running every day. I got to start doing lifting weights every day. It's like, well, just start doing something, right?
Mm-hmm. Just do something.
Just start doing something and work from there. If 20 years ago, if you ran a 6-minute mile, doesn't mean you're going to go out the next morning, and run a 6-minute mile.
Yeah.
You probably might never run a 6-minute mile again, but you can at least get back out and start doing something.
Just do something. That's why, and especially in law enforcement, like I say, man, because a lot of officers, they just get complacent and they're like, hey, I'm not gonna have to do that. I said, you just got to make sure you stay physically fit, because you never know where you're gonna be in the fight for your life. And like I said, I work in a rural county, but it's big. It's 835 square miles, so backup might be 20, 30 minutes away. You get into a fight with somebody, and you got to hold on for what you got. 15, 20 minutes. That's a long time to hold on to somebody that's really fighting you. So that's why I always encourage, getting some martial arts or getting some physical fitness training, because you're just going to need it.
So do you still do a little bit of martial arts?
Oh, yeah. So like I said, my cousin still has a karate school in Augusta, Georgia. And when I have time, I take my kids up there. But yeah, when I can train, I still train with them.
All right, good. So another thing, we talked about this a little bit before, we jumped on, but, a lot of people in law enforcement, they always get that question, right? They always get that, hey, what's the worst thing you've ever done? What's the worst call you've ever been on? And we talked about a little bit, that's kind of an annoying question, especially when it's coming from somebody from the general population. They just, they want to know all the crazy stuff anybody's ever done, with they work in law enforcement. Just to kind of, backdrop on that is the reason we talk about that on the show is because, we're just trying to encourage law enforcement, first responders, like, hey, you need to talk about some of these critical and traumatic events, some of these, these calls that you can label as one of your worst calls. You need to talk about it, right? You need to, whether you're talking about it with, with a friend or somebody from peer support or a counselor or a therapist, you need to kind of walk that back and work through that with somebody. So the reason we kind of talk about it, we bring it out is like, hey, we want other people to be willing to say, yeah, this is what I went through and this is what I did to kind of get beyond it. Because for a lot of people, they kind of get stuck there. And then they get stuck there and then it just compiles from there, right? Because anymore, research is showing that it's not one particular event, right? It's a series of events throughout a whole entire career that really start to build up, that really start to cause a lot of different things to manifest in people's lives. So looking at that, what's one of the worst calls that you've experienced that you've had to walk through yourself? And then, how did you kind of handle that? How did you kind of walk through that and back that out?
Well, it was recently, it was, the year before last. It was right before Christmas time. Like I said, I was working in narcotics, and so I was just sitting in the office, doing paperwork, looking at different videos, and we had a call go out about SUV that ran into the back of a semi trailer. They told us that the SUV was on fire and that it had four occupants in it. It was the two parents and two kids. So it took us about 15 minutes to get there. So we're racing down there. We get there, and then we hear over the radio one of our canine officers. He was a nurse before was doing CPR on a child, and the child was unresponsive. So we get there, and like I say, the scene is just chaos. Like I say, you see the truck over there that's been damaged. You see the SUV that's still on fire, smoke. You see the two parents on the ground over there screaming, trying to get to the baby. But I think the mother, or maybe the father, somebody had broke their back, so they couldn't really move. One of the other children had already gone to the hospital. Like I say, EMA had got there on time, well, not on time, in enough time, and just went ahead and took them away. But you could see the canine officer over there doing chest compressions on the child. And basically what they told me as I was running to them, like, the child's already dead, but he was just doing what he could do because, he wanted to save the child. And sometimes, like I say, when you get in those zones, especially as a law enforcement officer or first responder, you're like, okay, I can save this person. And you can see him over there going to town, doing chest compressions, doing CPR, trying to get that child back, and then eventually EMA came and they basically said, like, well, the child's gone. This child had to be like 7 or 8 years old. So just seeing all
Mhm.
that stuff kind of messes with you. Then, like I say, you see as other people are coming by trying to help, trying to figure out what's going on, but the general public, they see a dead child, they're going to just go all over the place. So they're screaming like, okay, what's wrong with the child? Is the child alive and all that stuff? And, you're trying to keep them away. So it's a kind of chaotic scene. So long story short, we got everybody together. Like I said, we got the parents and the EMA, got the other child. Like I said, they had to go to the morgue, of course. But it was just one of those situations where the other child made it and the parents made it. But, losing somebody before Christmas, especially a child, was, difficult. And you got to go home to your kids and look them in the eyes and be like, okay, man, you don't want anything like that to happen to them. And then you just get all these crazy thoughts in your head, like, what would I have done if that was me, or in reverse, like I said, if I was going through that type of situation. So basically after that, like I said, man, as general professional law enforcement do, we're like, okay, man, went on to the next call, went to go get some lunch, never really talked about it. So it was just one of those things that, I tell people all the time, you got to talk about these type of situations. But even for me in that time of that situation, I just didn't do it. I talked about it a little bit later on, briefly. I'd be like, at the end of the day, I shed a tear on scene. It was a little sad, but at the end of the day, your law enforcement, you got to set that up. You got to handle your job. You got to make sure everybody else around you is okay. So that's just how that was. And that was one of the worst things I've been to.
Yeah, and there's a lot with that, especially you talking about if you're on scene. Yeah, absolutely. You kind of got to stow some of that to get through the call, to get through the mission, to accomplish what needs to happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? But then I think what we do after the fact is we kind of do a disservice to each other, and we don't kind of come around and say, all right, how's everybody holding up? Anybody want to kind of walk this back, debrief this a little bit, and kind of go on to the next call, and you just keep working calls, and you never really unpack whatever that event was.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good to hear that that later on you did kind of talk about it. You did kind of get that out and alleviate some of that, because a lot of times that's not what happens. A lot of times you just kind of go on to the next call, and that just kind of gets stored, and then you just kind of push it in like everything else, and eventually it's gonna come out some way or another,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you don't deal with it, if you don't deal with some of these critical and traumatic events, they're going to manifest some way in your life.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on how you want it to come out. Do you want to do it on your own time and you're actually, bringing it out and you're talking about it and you're walking through that, or you want to wait till you kind of self-destruct and implode because you haven't really dealt with some of this stuff. And I think that for most people who are in law enforcement, I think the pediatric calls are going to be the worst. The ones involving kids are always going to be the worst, because for most, they probably have kids, right? They've got kids back home. So that's going to be a hard call for them.
Yes, sir. Yeah, because kids are defenseless in most cases, and just seeing them hurt, it kind of, disturbs a person. So, man, seeing a kid killed, or like I say, just seeing a kid, in bad situations does something to people. And like I said, I got a partner that works like child sex crimes. I told him, I said, I could never do that job. Never. I say, he tried to, show me some stuff. So we was working on the case. I was like, I don't want to see it. Like I said, I know how I am. I don't want to see anything like that. But it takes special people to do it, and I applaud them and do jobs that involve children being hurt or anything like that. Like I said, that's never been my cup of tea.
Yeah, that does take a special individual, somebody who's able to kind of take their own emotions, right, and reel those in, especially when they're dealing with somebody. They go and they've been investigating some type of case, and they actually go and arrest somebody, and it's been some type of child sex crime, and they've traumatized some poor little kid. Everything in you, wants to get a hold of that person,
Mm-hmm.
right, and get all that out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we understand that, but I mean, you've got to kind of maintain that composure. You've got to check that. You've got to, not grab a hold of that person and and just beat the brakes off them.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because that's what most of us want to do.
Oh yeah.
Especially if you're a father, or you're a mother or something like that. That's definitely a hard position to be in. And it's a hard job to work, and they definitely need somebody to talk to. People that work in that. In that kind of field, if you're working some department where you deal a lot with child crimes, especially child sex crimes, things like that, you got to have somebody to talk to. There's got to be somebody in your life that you can go to and you can unpack that stuff, because that stuff will build up absolutely for sure. Yes. So you got to talk about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I will say that in Georgia, and especially like in the agency I work for, they go to like every couple months they do like different conferences just for the people that's involved in those type of crimes, just so they can decompress. They have peer support. They have people there to debrief, mental experts and all that stuff. Like I say, it's just a lot to handle. And like I say, like you run, like some of those people are running cases like daily on different people doing crazy different stuff to kids. And like I said, they have different resources for them. So it's something that it just has to be done. You got to have somebody around you that you can talk to, especially if you work in those type of cases.
Yep. So we're going to kind of transition a little bit here. So, I asked about that call. So now, what is one of the most awkward or funniest calls that you've worked?
It was about 4 or 5 years ago. I was on crime suppression. Anyway, one of my lieutenants, he had just arrested a guy for burglary. So he was at our office, taking him through the interview process and all that stuff. And they called me over there to transport the guy to jail. So I'm like, okay, man, I'll come get him, usual day. So I get the guy, and just to paint the picture, we're walking down our hallway. We're always about to head outside. The guy's hands are handcuffed in front of me on a big Carhartt overall suit. So anyway, I'm walking to him, holding on to him, just barely holding on to his little Carhartt thing. And so we get to the front door, and my lieutenant just says, "Hey, Eric." So I, me being the person I am, I just happen to look around. And by that time, the guy had took off running in handcuffs. And so me, all I could think of was like scream as loud as I could. So be like I've always been a bigger boy. The guy takes off running. We run across the street. It's like these little white picket fences. They might have been like 2 or 3 feet. So he swan dives over it. I try to do the same thing. I run through it. I basically fall on top of it. Pull my taser out. I shoot him twice, but like I say, I was on a Carhartt thick overall. No effect. He's still running. And like I say, we run about 200-300 yards. And by that time, I'm out of juice. But they just so happen to hear me. So my other guys are coming. And so my lieutenant screams out, being the guy that he is, me not thinking like, here comes the dog. He doesn't have a dog. But I'm looking around like, man, if they let a dog out and I'm running, they're going to bite me. Anyway, one of these little short guys that work for us, named Dakota Clark, he hears us. He's in the very back of our office. He beats everyone past him and is able to catch up to the guy and get him back to custody. So it takes me another 30, 40 seconds to catch up to everybody. Because like I said, by that time, I'm heaving. Another guy that was running with us, he ran into our main street. And like I said, it had some gravel out. And so he slipped. And he tried to catch himself with his hand, and all the gravel went in his hand, so he messed up his wrist. It was just a big mess going on. And like I said, he was in handcuffs, but like I said, he smoked me. But I'm glad they heard him because he would have got away from me. And like I say, that burglary suspect wouldn't get caught. But we caught him, so at the end of the day, all ends well.
So did you say that you thought the lieutenant was saying, "Here comes the dog"?
Oh yeah, he said that. He said, "Here comes the dog." And I wouldn't pay attention at the time. Like, man, let me go ahead and stop. But he doesn't have a dog. But he was trying to say that to him so the guy could hear him and be like, okay, it's a dog coming. I'm going to stop. But the guy kept on going, so he wasn't paying no attention to it.
Oh, okay. All right. Mm-hmm. I got you. Yeah, because that would have just made that whole story a little bit more funny if somebody else, had gotten dog bit. Because that does happen.
Oh, I see. It was
where somebody gets dog bit.
Yeah, it was just recently. It might have been in Florida. It was somewhere. It was like a guy in the car chase. They wrecked him out. Anyway, they let the dog loose, and one of the police officers walking. He stopped. The dog bit his arm and all that stuff. But it happens though. They say it's just part of it.
Yeah. So when you look at your career and kind of where you're at now, what are three of the most significant things that you've learned throughout your career so far?
Patience, having patience with people is going to be really important. Like I said, you never know what's going on with somebody, and a lot of times people are not going to tell you that. And like I said, with us in law enforcement, we're dealing with people most of the time at the worst part of their life or a worst incident, or they're in a high stress situation, and we're supposed to be there to calm them down. And like I said, me, I used to be a hothead, so you have attitude with me, I'm gonna have attitude with you. Then we just going back and forth. We're not getting anything done. I had to learn how to have patience with people and basically learn how to diffuse the situation. Secondly, learn how to build rapport with people. Uh, just be able to build rapport is going to help you out so much more in law enforcement. I said people will give you so much more information if you're able to talk to them. They let you know, well, let them know that you generally care about what's going on. Like I say, being in narcotics, you got to be able to build rapport with people so you can have, informants and people from the public come talk to you. So patience and be able to build rapport with people are two different things. And then, like I say, man, just keeping a level head, working on your mental health. Like I say, me, I never really knew much about mental health until recently. Like, I heard people say, well, I'm struggling and stuff. Didn't pay no mind. I said I never gone through anything mentally, but as I've gone through stuff mentally, I understand like how it can really bear down on you. And like I say, people can think you're fine because you're gonna be smiling, you're still gonna laugh, but you're going through all kind of crazy emotions in your head. So just understanding the importance of mental health is always gonna be important to me. But I say I've been in that spot, I know how it is, and like I say, most people thought I was fine, but I was struggling. So eventually, I learned the importance of going to therapy, just having somebody that doesn't have a dog in the fight, just talk to them and just basically get it all out. Because like I say, in law enforcement, we tend not to talk to people. We don't want people to know what's going on. We're supposed to be,
Yep.
tougher than everybody else. Like that stuff shouldn't bother you. And like I said, it could be something small that could trigger something very huge inside of you. So you got to be able to talk to somebody. So the importance of mental health is something I always key in on. Like I say, you're seeing a lot of officers commit suicide for one reason or another, and a lot of times it's because things are building up. They never had anybody to talk to, and for another reason is like say we talk to people, and one of our biggest fears is that we talk to somebody and we say too much, they're gonna take our gun and their badge and be like, okay, you might not be fit for duty. So it's kind of like a catch-22 with law enforcement. Like some of us want to talk, but then we're like, hey, I might say the wrong thing. They'd be like, hey man, you got to give me that gun and badge. So just getting officers to understand that, hey, you might not have to talk to somebody at your agency or somebody that's affiliated with law enforcement, but find somebody to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. So those are definitely really good points. So, patience, building rapport, learning how to build rapport with individuals, and the importance of mental health and just mental wellness. I think those are really good, three key points that anybody should be building into, their career, their law enforcement career. And absolutely, especially what you're talking about with suicide, people want to talk. I think that there are people that really do want to reach out and say, hey, I'm having a hard time, but there's that stigma that we still have in the law enforcement community. And it's gotten better. And I think that, as we transition here 5-10 years down the road, I think that you'll see, that just continue to less and less and less. But, they feel like, I think personally for myself, this is my own personal opinion, of why we still have law enforcement suicides is, for one, people don't feel like anybody can relate to them, right? They feel like they're all alone. They feel like I'm the only one dealing with this because nobody talks about it, because no one's, willing to kind of lay it out and say, hey, yeah, this is, I've gone through something similar to that. And this is, I've had a similar experience. And the other thing is the devil's a liar, right? And he will absolutely capitalize on your hopelessness and your despair and those weak moments of your life. So, like I said, that's just my own, that's just Vern's personal opinion. And, for what it's worth. But I think that the more we start talking, the more we encourage other people to talk, and the more that afterwards, after a particularly bad call, kind of round table and say, hey, can we just all stop and say that was pretty messed up,
Mm-hmm.
and give people the opportunity? Because I think what also happens is, you get the rookies that come in, right? They're going through FTO, and they get, sometimes they get a really good FTO. Sometimes they get the salty, crusty guy that, nobody really wants. But what happens is, they go to their first bad call, and they're like trying to process this, and they're in their minds, and they're like, man, this is crazy. Like, this isn't how this is supposed to be. But they're looking at their FTO and everybody else there, and nobody else is saying anything, and nobody else is, is showing any type of emotion. So they're not going to show any emotion, right? They get back in the car, they don't say anything. The FTO doesn't say anything. So all we've done is we started this whole cycle all over again, right? So now we've indoctrinated this new this new recruit, this new rookie coming in to not say anything, right? To kind of stow it, to stuff it, and to just go on with the next thing. So I think the FTOs could have a really vital, stake or claim in changing the stigma when they're dealing with their trainees, right? Especially if it's a bad call. I mean, it may not be a bad call for them, but I mean, if you got somebody who's fresh out of the academy and now they're an FTO and they show up to a suicide where some guy's taking the whole top of the head off with a shotgun, you may have seen that half a dozen times,
Mm-hmm.
right? You may have seen it as FTO. You may be like, oh, is it another one? Well, your trainee, they've never seen anything like that. So in their mind, they're like, "Oh man, the guy had no head. There was nothing left, right?" And this is all going through their mind. So I think the FTOs could have a really, really big impact if when they get back in the car and they just take a moment and say, "Hey, that was pretty messed up. That's a rough call. How you holding up? You want to talk? You want to talk about this a little bit?" And I think that could really, really generate some really good positive, momentum moving forward. The stigma and just, really setting up our new trainees coming in, the new rookies coming in to start actually addressing some of this stuff before, it's too late.
Yeah, and I was recently just talking to somebody about the same thing, like the same aspect as like the parents. Like I never seen my mother and all of them struggle. Like I didn't know if they were going through mental battles or they're having a hard time at work. And I'm pretty sure they went through it, but I never seen it. So when I got older, I'm thinking like, well, hey, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the only one that's out here struggling, having financial problems, having issues at the house, just having mental battles. But like I say, I never seen it from adults. And like I say, sometimes you just got to talk about those type of things. And like say in law enforcement, like say you get somebody that's freshly out and they see all of us, basically like say when they come on the SWAT scene and like say we had to deal with somebody that just killed themselves or something like that, we're all out there laughing and joking. They see a dead body and they're messed up. They're like, okay, well, I can't be over there messed up and everybody else is, having a good time. They're still all right with it. And they got to process it. They're like, okay, well, I just got to internalize that. I can't be out here maybe have to cry or ask questions.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it kind of messes with you. So, and that's why I tell people, I say, it's okay to show weakness. I say, we always show the good moments of everything. You got to show people the weakness sometimes. Like I said, people got to understand that everybody's not having 100% day all the time. We all have those days where we're like, man, this is not it. I'm battling something. I just need some time. So just showing people that, life is not always going to be, bright days. You're going to have those rainy days and learn how to overcome them and come through them. It's going to help a lot of people.
Yeah. So with that, what advice would you give to those just coming into the career, right? Those going through the academy, recruits, trainees, those just coming on, they're just freshly starting out. What are some advice that you'd have for them?
One, find a good mentor. Find a good mentor that knows the job, that appreciates the job. That's like a salty old vet. Uh, Somebody that can actually
Not retired on duty.
yeah, somebody that can actually build you up and teach you the job, but also teach you the importance of like say community policing, be able to build that rapport with individuals. Like I said, my sheriff always told me, he said, you want to make people feel comfortable enough to have a beer with you, but also let them know that you'll take them to jail if they do anything wrong. And that's why I try to tell people, I say, you got to make sure no matter what they've done, at the end of the day, after you put them in handcuffs and everything's calmed down, you got to switch that off. You can't just take it personally anymore. You're like, okay, man, you did what you had to do. I did what I had to do. Now let's figure out what's going on. So just, be able to take it all in and process things on how it's going on. Like I said, man, it's a lot that comes with the job, especially if you work for a larger agency. Like I said, it's fast paced. You might not be able to have that intimate relationship with your community, and you're going from call to call, and calls are always stacked up when you get there. So just be able to take your time, breathe, and work through it. Like I said, man, you go through a day. You might have a shoot, you might have a drunk, you might have a fatality, and bringing that all home and be able to talk to somebody that's not in law enforcement is kind of hard. So keeping that in mind, you got to be able to talk to your family also. You got to let them know what's going on. Like I said, you don't want to give them every detail that's going on, but you got to have that communication there. But you go home and you just sit there as a law and they're trying to figure out what's going on. You don't talk to them. That's going to create issues. So be able to, and like for me, I'm a texter. Like I said, I might talk to you face to face, but I can write you a text. I'm like, okay, well, I had a long day. Somebody got shot. I had to deal with that. Somebody got ran over. I had to deal with that. I had to deal with a child that was injured or hurt by an adult. I had to deal with that. So if I don't talk to you right now, this is what I'm dealing with. Just some form of communication is always going to help. Like just not communicating at all is where the issue starts from. So those are just a couple of things that I'll tell the younger person that's coming to law enforcement. Like I said, you got to learn how to communicate with people, and that's from people you work with, people out in the public, and people in your life, like such as family and friends.
Absolutely. Well, that's some good advice there for sure. For definitely the people coming in and just starting out. So on the same lines, what advice would you give to your 15, 20, plus year veterans? The guys that have been in it, the guys that have been doing it, the guys and girls that have just been, grinding through their career.
Grab somebody and mentor them. You see somebody else that's new, that's struggling, and you went through those situations, pull them to the side, and like I said, they might not try to hear you at first, but try to impart your wisdom into them. Let them know that, hey man, I've been here. I know you're a good officer, but I see where you're going. Like I said, you might want to hold back on some certain things and all that stuff. And like I say, it's a little different talking to younger people. Like I say, I was one of those young people. I was hard headed, felt like I knew everything. I say they were probably the same way too when they were younger. So you need to make sure you grab somebody and just try to mentor them. Like I say, having a good mentor means a lot, especially in law enforcement. Like I say, if you don't find that mentor and they just leave you out to dry at the FTO, man, it can become a lonely job. So mentor somebody, and then also have a plan outside of law enforcement. Many times when we get in law enforcement, it becomes our identity. I say everything is law enforcement, this and that. And then I've seen it many times that when people get out of law enforcement, they've been doing it for 30, 40 years. After the first, second, or third year, they die. I say a lot of people find that as their identity, like they live behind that gun and badge. And while I want you to be proud of it, don't let that be your only sole purpose of living. Find something outside or get you a hobby. I said, law enforcement officers, we go into teaching. I said, we like teaching, do a podcast. Find something else that even if you're not in law enforcement putting the gun and badge on, that you can still put something out there that's going to make you feel important. But I say, after you lose that gun and badge, I say a lot of people feel their importance is left. They start, just hanging around the house, not doing anything, not going out. Then they go downhill. So make sure that you find a mentor or a mentee or somebody that you can impart wisdom for, and to make sure that you have something outside of law enforcement because you want injury away from not being law enforcement anyway. So make sure you have something on the outside.
Yeah, I think purpose is a huge thing, especially with people who have been in the career and getting ready to retire. Is and not only that, but also people who are currently in the careers. It's finding something else that's other than your career, right? Like, so this might be your calling, this might be your purpose, this is what you want to do, but it doesn't have to be the only purpose in your life, right? So if you're law enforcement, figure out something else to do, like you're saying, because that'll help you transition, right? If you decide, 15, 20 years in, you're like, man, I just can't do this job anymore, but I don't know what else to do because it's all I know.
Mm-hmm.
Start building those things in, start building another purpose in it. If you're in law enforcement, it's because you want to serve,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if that's something that you enjoy, then start serving somewhere else. Start, like you said, like mentor somebody, coach, just do something else that brings purpose and meaning to your life. Because then when you're not in law enforcement anymore, you've got something else to transition into. Because whether or not we all want to admit it, we all desire to have meaning, right? We all have a desire to have purpose and to be able to bring something to the table. And if all of your energy, all of your focus has been your career for 25, 30 years, and then you retire and that's all you know, that is a really, really hard hurdle to get over when now nobody's coming to you, nobody's seeking out your advice. Nobody's wanting you to fix their problems. Nobody's wanting you to say, hey, well, why don't you do it this way? Now all of that's gone and you're like, oh, now what do I do? So that's some really good advice, especially for, our 15, 20 plus year veterans that, that are either looking at retiring or just kind of looking down the road. Start incorporating some of that stuff now. I think that would be huge.
Yes, sir.
So do you think that, knowing that law enforcement is a demanding job, knowing, the toll it takes on the individual, do you think that, we do enough to prepare the new ones coming in for the career?
Uh, I mean, we do a good job at not FTO in the academy, but yeah, I mean, you can always do more. But like I say, like now they're trying to shorten up the academies because, like I say, it's just as short as a law enforcement officer. We're trying to get them as fast as we can. And like I said, I understand the purpose of it, but you still got to make sure they're properly trained to put them out there. Like I said, they're going to deal with so much, especially if they're a young person that's never done anything else. Like you're getting people that's like 18, 19, 20 that don't have any life experience, and they're going to the police academy and becoming police officers. So once you put them out there in the streets and they deal with all these different stuff, especially if you get somebody that's never, probably been sheltered, they always had a good family and stuff, they never dealt with the struggles that a lot of people deal with, they see some of the things that they're going to see, that's going to scare them away. So trying to incorporate all that in the academy is going to be hard. Like I say, you just can't put all that in the academy. You can't show them dead bodies. I mean, you can show them on screen, but you can't go to the actual scene where you smell that dead body and stuff like that. But I think we're doing a good job trying our best to make sure that they're prepared for the job that they're about to do.
Okay. So as you look back over your career and where you're at now, how much has your faith played a factor in that and where you're at today?
I was playing a lot. Like I said, it's been many nights I had to pray to God about things that was going on, especially in law enforcement. And like I say, just seeing how in the past couple of years, how everybody, felt that law enforcement were basically just out to get everybody, and they just basically painted that whole bad picture against all law enforcement officers when there was only a few that messed it up. And like I tell people, I say one thing: a good cop can't stand is a bad cop. I said we can't stand bad cops, and we want them all erased, but we can't get them all out at one time. But we try our best to weed them out. So just be able to pray about those type of situations, or when you're struggling with your outside life and you're struggling at work, be able to have that faith to be able to pull yourself through. Like I said, you're going to go through struggles, you're going to have battles, but you got to have something solid to lean on when you go through those battles. And like I say that's what my faith played a part in for me in law enforcement.
Yeah, and I think that's a factor that a lot of people in law enforcement don't really consider. You got people who are really big into exercise, physical fitness, right? Then you've got some that are really big into, the mental wellness and emotional wellness. But I think that, that aspect of just your faith and your spiritual life, I think that sometimes that gets lost. I think that sometimes, we don't really showcase that enough of how much, of an important factor that is in your life and dealing with the job, dealing with life in general, and just being able to fall back on something that's, of good grounding and good backing that gives you the ability to go through adversity and be able to understand, like, man, this isn't what I want to be going through. This sucks. This is terrible. But I know ultimately that the battle's already won, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's a huge factor that sometimes we skip and we kind of leave out. So, that's another reason we try to talk about the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Like we try to talk about those four main building blocks to make up any individual person, because, whether you have a belief or not in something spiritual, right, you still have a stake in your spiritual component of your life,
Mm-hmm.
right? So guess what? If you don't believe in anything, sorry to tell you, that's still a spiritual belief,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's still a spiritual belief that I don't believe in anything.
Mm-hmm.
For me, myself, I have I'm grounded in my relationship with Jesus Christ and what that means to me and how much that helps me through adversity and trials and struggles and things like that. So for me, that is a huge, huge benefit for me. So of course, I'm a big proponent of just taking care of yourself in all these areas, but especially, when it comes to your faith and the spiritual side of your life.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Like I say, we all need something that we can lean on. And like I tell people, I'm not going to be one of those Bible thumpers and try to get you to go to church, but just find something. Like I say, you got to have that something to believe in. And like I say, something that lets you know that, okay, I made it through this. I know I didn't do it by myself. Something or someone helped me through it, and that's just something important to have.
Yep. Well, LT, I appreciate the time that you took to jump on here and just kind of talk some of this stuff out and work through some of these questions. You've offered a lot of really good insight that a lot of current law enforcement, also those jumping into the career, can really just lean into and take and implement in their life to really kind of set themselves up for success. Because that's ultimately what we want, right? We want the success. We want law enforcement individuals. We want them to survive and thrive in their career. That's the whole idea, right? That's what we want. That's what we desire, is for everybody to be healthy and to be able to, just have a good, long, successful career. So I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate what you're doing, and, keep pushing forward.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you having me on. Had a good time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you tuning in and listening to Critical Aspects of Law Enforcement. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and share this resource with your fellow officers. The goal of Critical Aspects is to serve, support, and sustain the law enforcement professionals. So head over to www.criticalaspects.org for more resources and information. And as always, God bless and be safe.